Welcome to this episode of John's Journal. And we've just got done with Nicholas Cresswell, and I wanted to step into a different kind of journal and a different kind of person, really. So many, diaries and journals and memoirs that come back to us are those of famous people, biographies, autobiographies, right? You don't write your autobiography unless you think someone cares and that you've led an exciting life. Diaries aren't necessarily like that. Sometimes you start a diary just because you kind of want to talk to yourself into the future, I guess. Whatever a diary is exactly for, they're very interesting. The diary that we're going to be talking about for the next couple of episodes is a diary of Thomas Turner. And Thomas Turner lived in the middle of the 18th century. He died right towards the end of it, I think, in the 1790s. And he writes this journal from 1754 to, I think, 65. So about a 10-year period in his life where he's writing this diary. And the reason why this is important is just he's a regular person. He doesn't meet anybody extraordinary. He doesn't have any extraordinary adventures. He's just some of them are kind of extraordinary, but he's just a regular guy, and he lives in Sussex in England, in this time period where it's basically right in the French and Indian War time period. So the war does pop up here and there. He starts off, he's a young man in his 20s, he's married, he's doing a school, he's doing teaching at the very beginning, and quite soon after that he stops doing that and he has a store. So he's just selling, goods, and they weren't quite so specific about what they're selling, in the time period. Sometimes, you kind of shift around in your goods or sell whatever you thought was, you could get a good deal on. So Thomas Turner, he's in East Hoathly, I'm not sure exactly how you say that particular little town name. This book, I don't know if it's published in any, it's a fairly small run from 1925. You can still find this book online. I don't think there's any current printing in it. It may be in the public domain, so I may try publishing this one. It's a very neat little book, though. So let me read to you the reason why, he doesn't state it necessarily, but the reason why he starts this journal or diary here. And this is February 8th, 1754. As I by experience find how much more conducive it is to my health, as well as pleasantness and serenity to my mind, to live in a low and moderate rate of diet, and as I know I shall never be able to comply therewith in a strict manner as I should choose, by unstable and over easiness of my temper, I think it therefore fit to draw up rules of proper regimen, which I do in the manner and form following, which I hope I shall always have the strictest regard to follow, as I think they are not inconsistent with either religion or morality. If I am at home or in company abroad, I will never drink more than 4 glasses of strong beer, one to toast the king's health, the second, the royal family, the third, to all friends, and the fourth, to the pleasure of the company. If there is either wine or punch, never upon any terms or persuasion to drink more than 8 glasses, each glass to hold no more than half a quarter of a pint. I like that. It's so complicated, that last end, half a quarter of a pint. It's like 8 glasses, each no more than a half of a quarter, which is, of course, an eighth. So a total no more than a pint, right? He could have just said that instead of saying 8 times an eighth. Doesn't matter. But he starts this off in February 1754, and basically he's just writing it to himself saying, don't drink too much, don't drink too much. He doesn't talk about anything else. That's the only thing he's talking about. He doesn't write again in this, or there's no more entry. There's not another entry until June 26th. So months later. And then he says, this day made an end of instructing Miss Day, read part of The Spectator, prodigiously admire the beauties pointed out in the 8th book of Milton's Paradise Lost by The Spectator's criticism, wherein is beautifully expressed Adam's conference with the Almighty, and likewise his distress on losing sight of the phantom in his dream, and his joy in finding it is a real creature when awake. He goes on to talk about reading Clarissa Harlow. So that's a novel, sort of a romantic novel. I don't know, a novel, a prototype of a novel in the 18th century. Again, we get from this he's a teacher, and also that he's a reader. He's a reading man. He will skip over and I'm not going to spend very many days in this, but I do want to catch just a couple things here. June 30th, or June 20th. And so this is a whole year. So we were just reading June 26th. This is 1755. A year later, it's only a page later. There are not very many entries. This day, being my birthday, I treated my scholars with about 5 quarts of strong beer and had an issue cut in my leg. Apparently he was having some kind of problem with his leg, so he had some little medical work done, and he treated his scholars with 5 quarts of strong beer. I don't know how many students he has, but he can't have that many students. Maybe he has 10, so each got a pint of strong beer. Oh yeah, and notice back here at the beginning, he talks about strong beer. Never more than 4 glasses of strong beer. And they certainly had a division in that time period. They had regular small beer and strong beer. Well, maybe sometimes you'd have just regular beer, but a lot of their beers had more alcoholic content. And then they had a version of small beer, which was made made from the what was left over from making strong beer, and they'd make another like really weak batch of beer, maybe 1.5%, 1%, maybe even 0.5% beer. So, but he's treating his scholars, his students, with strong beer. We will skip way ahead here. His entries do become more close. And there's an entry here for October 15th that it's really big, but I'm going to skip into the middle of it. My wife and I have fixed to go to Hartfield. My wife endeavored to borrow a horse of Joseph Fuller, of Thomas Fuller, of William Piper, of Joseph Burgess, to no purpose. They have no reason for not doing it, but want of good nature and a little gratitude. Though I make no doubt but they will, some or other of them, be so good-natured as to come and say, "Come, do this land tax or widow tax book for us," and then I will always find good nature enough to do it, and at the same time to find them in beer or gin, pipes, tobacco, and then poor ignorant wretches, they will sneak away and omit to pay for their paper, but, God bless them, I'll think it proceeds more from ignorance than from ill nature. My wife, having hired a horse of John Watford, about 4 o'clock we set out on our journey for Hartfield. And as we were riding along near Hastingford, no more than a foot's pace, the horse stood still and continued kicking up until we was both off in a very dirty hole. But thanks be to God, we received no hurt. My wife was obliged to go to Hastingford House to clean herself. My wife and I spent the even at my father's Slater's, and we dined off some ratios, or rations probably, of pork and green salad. So green salad. So we get to hear about transportation. There isn't a lot for transportation, probably that at this time. So they had to get a horse, and he was riding in front. She was probably riding in the back, and they had to borrow one. They didn't have means of transport, and then they ran into this problem of falling into a mud hole and having to stop and clean themselves, and then finally getting where they belonged and having pork and green salad. So, he starts off this with the conviction, making his resolution not to drink too much. But we see there's a good reason for that, because over and over in this diary, he has that inclination, that problem where he drinks too much. Thursday, August 23rd. Came home in the afternoon, not quite sober. At home all day, I know I have behaved like an ass, more like an ass than a human being. Doubtless not like one that calls himself a Christian. Oh, how unworthy I am of that name. A lot of this is a sort of working through what he's thinking about, religion, and he reads a lot of sermons. He goes to church a lot, and he has this constant problem with, apparently there's nothing else to do, in town, so they drink a lot, and that causes him a lot of problems and a lot of self judgment. And at the time, especially with the 17th century work, The Way of Duty, there's a lot of pietism that is within England at the time. That idea that you have to be good, you have to work out goodness. So we see that a lot here. Now, let's see, October 24th. I went to Jons's to the public vestry. It was the unanimous consent of all present to give Thomas Daw, upon condition that he should buy the house in the parish of Waldron, for which he has been treating, by reason that he would then be an inhabitant of Waldron, and clear our parish 1/2 ton of iron, 10 pounds, a cauldron of coal, 2 pounds, in cash, 8 pounds, and find him the sum of 20 pounds, for which he is to pay interest, for to buy the said house. A present for a man that has already about 80 pounds. But yet I believe it is a very prudent step in the parish, for he being a man with but one leg, and very contrary withal, and his wife being entirely deprived of that good blessing, eyesight, there is great room to suspect that there would, one time or other, happen a great charge to the parish, there being a very increasing family. And I doubt the man is none of the most prudent, he having followed smuggling very much in the past, and which has brought him into a trifling way of life. So this is a very interesting reading, and it has a lot to do with dealing with the poor and what welfare is like in this time period. And here we are in England. The part of this story is that parts of the colonies have the exact same kind of system going on here. And that is that the welfare that's going on when you have families in need of help, that is a very, very local matter. And in this case, he's going to sort of a town meeting, and he shows up in this situation. Often he talks about going to these meetings. And they're talking about dealing with this one particular family that wants to buy a house in a neighboring town, and they're willing to come up with all this money, even though he's got some money. They're willing to come up with this money to help him buy this house in another town, just so they can get rid of him, because they think he is going to, or at least he thinks he's going to be a charge. He's going to cause a lot of cost to the parish sometime in the near future, and so that it's a much cheaper deal right now to pay him off to move away than to have him stay in town when he'll probably need to have all these charges on the ask for help in the future. And it's like, shove him into the next town where they can deal with it, right? The entry after this, and this is very, very common. Same thing's happening in all kinds of places. It's just like shuffle those people off to the next place. October 31st. In the morn, Fielder brought our herrings, but could get no pandals. I paid him for 1,100 herrings, 33 shillings. Not often does he talk about individual pieces of individual transactions in this. Now we have other diaries and journals. So here's Matthew Patten. And Matthew Patten's diary and journal is really a day book for his business. It's basically just business transactions. There's very little personal in there. This is all personal and very few transactions. So we have all kinds of different things like that. Herrings, so they're getting all these herrings, and pandals, apparently an obsolete term for shrimp. So he wanted shrimp also and didn't get them. And my guess is from the quantity here that this is a business transaction and that he's selling these on to people in the community. This entry here for Thursday, February 25th is probably in 1756 or 57. This morning about 6 o'clock, just as my wife was got to bed, we was awakened by Mrs. Porter, who pretended she wanted some cream of tartar. But as soon as my wife got out of bed, she vowed she would come down. She found Mr. Porter, Mr. Fuller, and his wife with a lighted candle and part of a bottle of wine in a glass. The next thing was to have me downstairs, which was apprised of. I fastened my door. Upstairs they came and threatened to break it open. So I ordered the boys to open it. When they poured into the room, and as modesty forbid me to get out of bed, so I refrained. Didn't have very much clothing on. But their immodesty permitted them to draw me out of bed, as the common phrase is topsy-turvy. But however, at the intercession of Mr. Porter, they permitted me to put on my breeches, and instead of my upper clothes, they gave me at the time to put on my wife's petticoats. This is so weird. And in this manner they made me dance, without shoes and stockings, until they had emptied the bottle of wine and also a bottle of my beer. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they found their way to their respective homes, beginning to be a little serious, and in my opinion, ashamed of their stupid enterprise and drunken perambulation. Now let anyone call in reason to his assistance and seriously reflect on what I have before recited. And they will join me in thinking that the precepts delivered from the pulpit on Sunday, though delivered with great ardor, must lose a great deal of their efficacy by such examples. So, the intercession of Mr. Porter here in the next entry. We had as a good sermon as I ever heard Mr. Porter preach, it being against swearing. So Mr. Porter, their preacher here, was in that group of people that caused this operation to happen earlier. that is, I want to touch on sort of sad things that happen in this journal in upcoming episodes. There'll just be one or two more episodes, but very, very interesting. Daily life of folks in the 18th century. It is good to read pieces like that and to help us realize, the day-to-day grind and the realities of, weaknesses and how we deal with them. That people in the 18th century are just like us. They may not have cars to drive around, or the internet or other kinds of, things like we have, but they're living day-to-day lives inside their heads and doing things, and just like we are. They aren't special, super people or empty husks, sort of, like that we can make them into. People in the past, they didn't have, they weren't real people. Sometimes I think we kind of get lost in the idea that just because we don't know them, or that they're known people in history, that they aren't just like us. So a nice reading, and a really, really interesting one that gives us a glimpse into just how similar and how different their lives were in the 18th century. Thank you so much for being part of Townsends Plus and your amazing support of what we do in all that we in all the different places where we make things happen. So we couldn't do it without you, and thanks for watching today.